Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending. So, Knowage was started more than 15 years ago under the name of Spago BI. Then the product encountered a great growth through many collaboration and many partnerships. So until in 2016, Spago BI changed name to the actual name Knowage. So today, Knowage is leading the market of innovation and is moving, let me say, faster and faster towards the so-called universe of big data. So in order to create a support towards the big data world, these new SolR functionalities, among other novelties, have been developed. So before diving into the details of SolR, let me give you a brief recap of the whole suite so that everyone can better understand which are its goals and the features. Knowage, as many of you already know, is open source and its code is hosted on GitHub public repositories. So you can go there, take a look at the code, create some forks, some pull requests, and so on. Knowage allows users to retrieve data from multiple data sources and use this data to create advanced visualizations. It is accessible either via a browser or via a mobile device. It is indeed released into two different versions, the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition. Knowage can be integrated inside other products, but also single analysis made in Knowage can be integrated, for instance, into a web page. So if I have a web page and I want to embed an analysis made in Knowage, I can do it. Last but not least, Knowage is cloud ready, which means that it can be, of course, deployed on cloud environments. Be aware that at the moment you can also find Knowage on, for instance, on Amazon AWS Marketplace. So if you're interested in it. So now let's go back to SolR stuff and technical functionalities. As all of you know, inside Knowage, you can create through a nice presenting and a very easy to use graphical interface, you can create every kind of personalized and interactive analysis. You can choose among a set of tools like widgets, graphs, visualization, and so on, and they help you create cockpits. So the goal of this SolR extension is to merge these advanced visualization tools and the analytical power of Knowage with the efficiency of a SolR engine. With this improvement, users will be able to create first and then perform SolR queries directly from Knowage, and directly from Knowage graphical interface, directly from Knowage environment. And then they will be able to use the SolR results inside the widgets, for instance, and this will be very, very comfortable to do. So this is the real power of this innovation. The results of these SolR datasets will be easily explorable from the Discovery widget. That is a widget that has been developed as an ad hoc support towards SolR datasets. With this widget, it's very, very easy to visualize the SolR query results in the form of a table, and also instead of a complicated JSON that is the output returned by the SolR engine. And also it will be possible to modify this result by launching interactive queries towards the SolR engine. So I'm going now to run a live demonstration now in order to show you how you can do all of this stuff in practice. First of all, I'd like to start by showing you a short video about a cockpit that we have made by using SolR, so that it shows you something that you can do by using these tools. So as you can see here in the video, on the bottom part of the screen, This is a discovery widget, so it leverages on a SolR infrastructure. It is composed by three main pieces: the table that shows the actual result, text search, and the face setting component. We will later talk in depth about these pieces, but for now be aware that this is the structure of the discovery widget. This widget is perfectly embedded inside a Knowage cockpit, which means that, as you can see, by interacting with the SolR widget, I'm changing also the output of other widgets. So everything is embedded together and is responsive. So by clicking and interacting on one component of the cockpit, I'm also changing the behavior of the other components, like it happens in every component of Knowage. So this is an example of cockpit that you can develop by using SolR together with other stuff. Now let's start from the official documentation. Let's take a look at the official documentation together and see how the component works. So the SolR features come divided in two different parts. The first one is the creation of a dataset by leveraging on a SolR engine, of course. And then with this data, we can explore them by creating a discovery widget. So now let's find out how we can create a SolR dataset. So in the dataset section, what I have to do is pick the type SolR as dataset type and then define how I can reach my SolR instance. So suppose that I have installed and configured a SolR running engine at this address. I have to specify the address at which I can reach this SolR engine, and then the parameters that will create my dataset. So for instance, the SolR core that I want to connect to, the query in order to retrieve the data, and so on. I can also customize these queries by, for instance, well, I can make them parametrical. So I can create some parameters, give them a value, and then use these parameters, for instance, when performing queries and so on. Also, I have the possibility to personalize the request headers if I want. So here in this section, I have to define the query that will return the data that I am interested in. Then, once I have defined this dataset, I can use it inside the cockpit, for instance, by using a discovery widget. What does the discovery widget do? As we were saying before, the widget is used in order to easily browse into a SolR dataset. It is composed by three main components: the table that holds the actual data, a text bar, and the facet stuff. This widget can be personalized in every inch, so I can set some options about what I want to see here and how do I want the widget to behave. I can customize the style, I can customize some look and feel options, and so on. I can do everything that I would do in any other widget of Knowage. So, okay, now that we have seen how it works in theory, let's see it working on practice. So, first of all, I have configured and create on my local host machine an instance of SolR, which is running. So I have installed SolR on my local machine. I have created a SolR core, which is called books, and I have created an index. Of course, I am working with a very simple SolR instance in this case, because as you can see, the data that I am connecting to is contains only 10 records, so very, very simple data. And these are data about books. So I have 10 entries, 10 different books, and the data about this book contain, for instance, the name of the book, the author, the price of the book, and some other stuff. So of course, in a real world example, I wouldn't have only 10 records. Maybe I would have 10,000, of course. But this is just for an example. So consider it a toy example, a toy data set. But it will serve for what we need. So it will show us. It will be useful to show you how this feature works. So this will be the data that we will play with. Suppose that I have this data. So how can I do from Knowage to connect to this SolR instance, retrieve the data that I'm interested in, browse them, use them, and do whatever I want? Okay, so let's go, let's enter Knowage. And first of all, let's go to the dataset section. In the dataset section, here I define a new dataset. So here, when I create a new dataset, I have to pick a label. So for instance, SolR example. I have to pick a name for my dataset. I have to define some additional information like the scope and the category. Of course, these operations, the ones of you who already know and have used Knowage will already know this, but you do this kind of configuration for every kind of dataset that you create. So once you have defined the name, label, and so on of your dataset, you go to the type tab, which is the important tab. Here you pick the dataset type, and as you can see in Knowage supports many different ways to create a dataset. For instance, you can create a dataset starting from a file or from a query, and so on. Of course, today we're interested in the SolR dataset, so I picked SolR as dataset type. Okay, so now what I have to do is specify the address of the SolR instance that I want to connect to. So of course it can be a remote address or a local address. In this case, I am working with my local environment. So the address that I will put here is exactly this: HTTP localhost. My local instance of SolR is running on port, as you can see here, 8983. So this is the port, and /SolR. Next thing that I have to do is specify the collection, which basically is the SolR core. As you can see here, I can define many different cores. So I have to specify to which core I want to connect to. In this case, its name is books. Then I have to specify the query. So this query has to be written in the SolR with the classic SolR syntax. So here I specify a query in order to filter and select the subset of data that I am interested in, always by following, of course, the SolR syntax. So for the moment, let's just suppose that we want to select all the data and see what happens. Okay, yes. Of course, when I write down a query towards SolR, I have to specify the fields list, the field list. So I have to tell SolR which fields I am interested in. As we were seeing before, my books have got information about, for instance, the name of the book, the author that wrote the book, the price of the book, and so on. So here I have to specify which fields I am interested in. So suppose that, for instance, I am interested in the ID of the book, the name of the book, and the author of the book. So here I specify ID, name, and author, and launch the query. Okay, so as you can see, the SolR engine will return data based on the query that I have just written. So I have selected all of my data, and I have chosen to see only the author, the ID of the book, and the name of the book. This is the basic functionality, how it basically works. But of course, let's see how we can customize this query that we send to SolR. So the first thing that we might want to change is, suppose I don't want to see only information about the ID, the name, and author, but I also want to see, for instance, the price of the book. So I add a field here, rerun the query, and now there is a new column. A new column appears, and it shows information about the price of each book. So when I create a SolR request, I can manipulate, modify, and pick the columns that I am interested in. So whenever I change this field, I will see the result, the output dataset changing. Another thing that I might want to change is the query. So as I told you earlier, this query that is written in the SolR syntax is selecting all the records. So I had 10 books, and here SolR gives me back all those 10 books. But what happens if I just want to select a subset of these books? For instance, what happens if I only want to see the books written by the author called Martin? So here I can customize the query, and for instance, I can just select the books that have author called Martin. Let's click preview, and we will see that this time, SolR, instead of returning back all the books, has understood my query and returns me only the books with author equals Martin. So by writing this query, I can tell SolR which books I am interested in. Another powerful thing that I can do is to make this query parametrical. So what I mean by parametrical, so suppose that instead of selecting the author Martin, I want to define a parameter which is called my favorite author, and this is a parameter of type string whose default value is Martin. So instead of showing only the books by author Martin, this time I want to show the books of my favorite author. So when I execute the dataset, I will have to specify the value of this parameter. So maybe this time my favorite author is Martin, so I pick Martin, and it will show me the books of Martin. But if I change the value of my favorite author, so for instance, my favorite author this time is Asimov, I write Asimov as the value of my parameter, I launch the query, and this time SolR will give me back only the book of my favorite author, which is Asimov. So in this way, I can not only manipulate the result of SolR, but I can do it in a dynamic way. And this is the real power of embedding the SolR infrastructure inside a software like Knowage. So whenever I have configured my dataset, well, of course, there are some other things that you can customize. So for instance, you can customize the request header, so the headers of the request towards the SolR engine. You can add some filter query parameters. This is all SolR stuff, so whoever of you knows SolR will have to deal with it one day. And we can specify faceting, so the facet query, facet fields, and prefix. For the moment, I would like to keep it simple, so let's stick to basic functionalities. For whoever you is interested in go into depth, of course, take a look at the documentation and don't hesitate to contact us. So, okay, let's suppose that I am okay with this dataset, the dataset that we have configured together, and all I have to do is click save, and my dataset will be created. But what shall I do with this dataset that I have created? So suppose that I have the SolR engine and the dataset configured. So I am now able to retrieve data from SolR. I retrieve the data that I want, and I want to use them. So let's go to the cockpit part of Knowage. Let's create a new empty cockpit, and let's try to browse the SolR result. So let's add a new widget. Among the list of existing widgets, you will see that there is the discovery widget. So let's pick this discovery widget. Let's select the dataset that we are interested in. So SolR dataset, we want to work with it. For the moment, let's just save it as it is and see what happens. So this is what happens. This is the widget that we just created. And as you can see, it leverages on the dataset that we have previously created. So, and just shows me the result of that dataset, but in a nice appearing way. So I don't have to deal with JSON. I don't have to deal with anything. I just have a nice looking table and some stuff that I can work with. So this is the table that contains the actual data. Of course, I can modify the look and feel options of this table, and I will later tell you how. Then here on the top part of the widget, I have a text search bar. So by putting some text inside here, I can filter and select only a subset of the data that are appearing here in the table. And on the left part, I have the facets list. So this shows, for instance, results, the books grouped by author. So I have 3 books of author Martin, 2 books of author Alexander, and so on. So this is basically it, but now let's see how everything works inside this widget. So let's consider the case in which instead of having only 10 records, I have 10,000 records or 10 million records. So I might want to leverage on the power of SolR to browse this data. So maybe I want among these 10,000 books to select only the book of George Martin, or maybe I want to find the books that contain the word game inside the title. So by writing here, for instance, game, what I see happening is that the widget will show me only the books containing this word. So game, the word that I am searching for is highlighted, and I am basically I'm performing some selection on this record, and this is very, very useful if I want to browse this data, because they might be 10,000 records or 10 million records, and maybe I want to find only 5 of these books. And this is a very powerful tool to do it in an efficient way and also nice presenting, because as you can see, it is very easy to understand how it works. It shows the result in a nice presenting way. It's easy to interact with it. So let's try to learn whatever I do with this tool. So this is the first thing that I can do: filter by a word, by some text search. Of course, when I write the text here, I can choose in which field I want to look for it. So for instance, now I am searching among the names. So if I write game, SolR will filter results based on the name, but also I can search on the column Martin. So SolR is looking for the word that I write here inside every column. But this is something that I can customize. So suppose that the behavior that I want to configure is the following. When I write a word, I don't want SolR to search in every column, but I want SolR to search only on the name of the books. So how can I do this? Let's go to edit mode and modify the settings of the widget. You see these flags here, enable text search. Here, by setting this flag, you can decide on which column the text search will be done. So suppose that when I write a word, I want it to be searched only on the name column. So let's save it like this, and let's write game. So you will see that data will be filtered based on this word, and it's correct because it is in the column called the name. But if I look, for instance, for the word Martin, this time SolR will return no rows, and this is correct because there is no books that contain the word Martin in the title. So by setting that flag, I told the widget, hear me, don't look for the words that are right in this column anymore. Just look for it in the columns that I told you. So in this case, name. Okay, this is the first thing that we can configure. Here, let's make some order. Maybe I want to see the ID first, and then the name of the book, the author, and last the price. So another thing that I can configure is the show column. So for instance, suppose that, well, I don't want to see the price here in this table, so I want to hide this column. So I go in the configuration and I hide the column price. Let's save, and the column price disappears. Okay, so the other thing, the last thing that I can do is to decide which facet I want to show. So as I told you earlier, this is the facet component, and it shows you results grouped by author, ID, and name. But let's think a second about it together. It's okay to group results by author because it might be useful to know that 3 books are written by Martin, 2 by Alexander, and so on. And it also might be useful to know that of all the books that I have, 2 books contains the word game, 1 book contains the word company, and so on. But it doesn't make much sense to group by ID because ID is a unique identifier, so it doesn't make so much sense. So what I can do, I just hide the show facet flag on the field ID, and here I will not see the ID facet appearing anymore. Okay, the last thing that I can do in this configuration is to define some, let me say, some style options. So maybe I want to change the background color of the ID column. So let's go here and, I don't know, for instance, pick a color for the font. I want a red font and green background. So let's pick green. Let's save. And I will see the background color that I've chosen and the text color that I've chosen. So the last thing that I can do here is to define the style of what I see. You can do this also for the facets. Okay, let's switch to the second and last interesting tab. In this tab, you can define and manipulate the 3 main components of the widget, which are the data table, the facet on the left, and the text search bar on the top. So first of all, you can enable and disable each one of these components. So suppose that I don't want the text search. So I go here and I disable the text search. Let's save. And as you can see, it has disappeared. I can do the same thing if I don't want to see the facet, and I can also hide the table if I am not interested in it. So in this tab, I can decide to hide or show each single one of these components. For the data table, I can set the maximum number of items for each page. So now is set to 10, So as you can see, in each page I have 10 books. But what if I only want 5 books per page? I can go here, change the configuration, set 5, save, and you will see that for each page, the widget shows only 5 entries. If I want to see the other 5 entries, let's go to the second page, and these are the other results. So I can change to 3, 5, 10, 100, whatever I want. Then let's make it back to 10, and let's change some other parameter. So for instance, what I can change is decide to enable or disable the selection on facet. What does it mean? So now this flag is on, so selection on facet are enabled. What does it mean? It means that if I click on, for instance, on the facet Martin, I can filter my results based on it. And here you can see that a Knowage selection has been performed. So let's clear it and try with another selection. So I see here that I have, for instance, 2 books that contain the word game in the title. I click on the word game and I will trigger a selection. This selection will filter data and show me only data that contains the word game in the title. Let's clear the selection once again. So if I disable this flag, whenever I click on a facet, I will not trigger a selection anymore. So another thing so I can disable it, and for instance, I can enable this flag, which will close by default the facets. So this time, when this flag is on, the facet will not be opened by default, but they will be closed every time I open the widget for the first time. And if I want to see them, I will have to open manually. The last thing that I can customize is creating a default value for the text search. So for instance, I can define a default text search of type static. For instance, static value equals Martin. So whenever I will open the widget for the first time, I will see this word appearing here, and the widget will be already filtered by this name. Of course, right now it is not finding anything because we have to enable the text search also on the field author, because right now it is searching for Martin only on the title of the book. So okay, so if I set a default for this text search, whenever I open the cockpit, I will already find it initialized, and the results will already be filtered by what I have here. Okay, so these are the main functionalities. I want to spend still a couple of words about the style and look and feel options. Of course, from this tab forward, so these 3 other tabs are not only for the discovery widget. They work with every other widget of Knowage, but let's just spend a couple of seconds on it anyway. Here in the style tab, I can define some look and feel options. So I can define the header of the widget, rows height, colors, paddings, and so on. So for instance, let's create a title for the widget. The test is discovery example. I can pick a color for the title. I will not do that, but of course I can pick and customize it however I want. Let's save, and here appears my title, the title that I've just chosen. So I can customize how the widget looks basically. The last thing that I can do is define a cross navigation and some filters on the dataset, let me say. So these are functionalities that work with every other widget, not only with the discovery widget, but be aware that they exist. So have a nice day, all of you. Thank you and goodbye.